Now, of all the members of the Terry College family, the one who needs certainly no introduction is Savannah attorney Sonny Seiler. Sonny is here with his wife Cecilia, and we're very glad about that. And also at the top of that list of alumni of the Terry College, we like to include Sonny's alter ego, Ugga, the English Bulldog, the mascot who's represented the University of Georgia with such distinction for over half a century. In fact, ever since Sonny was an undergraduate at the Terry College back in 1956. Now, I hesitate to call Ugga 1 a student because I have it on good authority that he never attended any of the classes. But Ugga 1 did have an official student ID card, so we do like to claim Ugga 1 as a Terry alumnus. Ugga 5 would later apply his paw print to the very first membership card of the newly created dues-paying UGA Alumni Association. Those are just two of the points of interest in a very wide-ranging canine career of public life that later would culminate in a cover story for Sports Illustrated, when the magazine named Ugga 5 the best college mascot in the country. It's a title that heirs continue to hold today, including Ugga 7, who will succeed his father as mascot at the Georgia home game, the first home game on August 30th. Faculty at the Terry College know a lot about the importance of branding, and so do the people responsible for establishing and maintaining this Endura Ugga brand. Sonny, his wife, son Charles, and daughter Swan. With Ugga in tow, the Seilers have traveled more than 175,000 miles. That's 7 times around the world. And they've done all that in support of the University of Georgia and its athletic teams. They make that 8-hour round trip between Savannah and Athens as often as some people go to the grocery store. So service is clearly a way of life for the Seilers and for the University of Georgia, and we're deeply indebted to them. The person who has called virtually all the shots in Ugga's career is Sonny Seiler, who says that as growing up in Savannah as a kid, it never occurred to him to do anything other than go to the business school at the University of Georgia. Both Sonny's father and grandfather had run the Groceteria, which was the first self-service food store in the South. And Sonny found employment there, stocking shelves and running errands. Sonny says his favorite instructor at the Terry College was finance professor Glenn Sutton, and when he graduated and moved on to law school at the University of Georgia, his distinguished legal career earned him a term as president of the Georgia State Bar. Sonny's also a member of the Screen Actors Guild. Now, that came about because of his real-life role as the victorious attorney in the Jim Williams murder trial. And you're probably familiar with that because of the New York Times best-selling book, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. When Clint Eastwood adapted that book to a movie, he asked Sonny to play the judge. Ugga 5 also had a part in the movie, which came about after Eastwood was wrestling with Ugga on the floor of Sonny's law office. And I think the story goes that Eastwood said, "Ugga, I'm going to make you a celebrity." Well, Cecilia Seiler was standing nearby, and she said, "Excuse me, Mr. Eastwood, but Ugga already is a celebrity." Well, today's speaker is the man who made it all happen. Sonny, let me ask you to come up and tell us about it.
Thanks, Bob. You know, I had the pleasure of being here about 4 years ago, not in this same facility, but to address Third Thursday. And I'm amazed by the people that go before me, and I thought that I would do my homework before I jumped into the fire today and take a look at the people who have preceded me, at least this year. You had Jim Langford, who talked about new plans for Jekyll Island, Doug Benn, who talked about the do's and don'ts of post-merger integration. You had Julio Ramirez, the vice president of Burger King, one of the most successful fast food chains in the country. You've heard from our fine athletic director, Damon Evans, who, believe it or not, manages a business with an annual budget of $73 million. That's a pretty good little business in Athens. He does a great job. You've heard from my friend Chris Welton, the CEO of Helios Partners, an international sports marketing consulting firm. And in July, I think Ken Jackson addressed you. He was the CEO of Shaw Industries, leading manufacturer of flooring in the country. Pretty heavy. But now, the dean brings you Sonny Seiler, who's going to tell you what it's been like taking a Bulldog to games for 53 years on a string. And after today, no one can ever say that Bob didn't take a chance. I'm honored to appear again here. I value my BBA degree from Georgia, and I'll try not to disappoint. Before I get into the meat of this, let me assure you of something, because some of you might not have been at the function last night. At the first home game, we will bring on UGA 7. It was not my choice to keep this under wraps, but this was dictated by the athletic department because Claude Felton is so busy with the Southeastern Conference and with news conferences that had he announced anything on 7, he would have had to put everything else aside. So we had an agreement that we wouldn't show the dog, we wouldn't tell about the dog, we wouldn't publish any pictures about the dog until the first home game. But in case some of you are expecting to see a puppy he ain't. He already weighs 56.5 pounds. He's full grown. He's UGA's son. He's a solid white male. And that's nothing that's dictated to us. It just happens to be that that's the way we've perpetuated the line. He is house trained. That's right, isn't it, Cecilia? And we will bring him on at that first game. I challenge you to tell the difference between 6 and 7 from 20 feet. That's the look-alike appearance that he has. I don't think you'll be disappointed, and we just hope we've made the right choice. You never can tell. It's a gamble, but we've been doing it a long time, and we think we know what we're doing. You know, talking about bulldogs, I'm reminded of a young 10-year-old student down in South Georgia who got in trouble at school for always being late. He would offer these exaggerated excuses. One day he was an hour late, and he explained to the teacher that he stopped by the river to fish with some tourists, and they caught 99 trout. The teacher said, well, where are the fish? He said, oh, teacher, I use their bait and their equipment. I'll let them keep that. A few days later, he was tardy again, and this time he told the teacher he took a shortcut through the woods. He ran into a leprechaun. The leprechaun had found the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow and asked him to help him carry it back to his cave, which was even deeper in the woods. Teacher said, well, where's the gold? He said, oh, teacher, Johnny doesn't need any gold. I let him keep it because he needed it. It went on and on and on. Finally, the teacher got worried about this habit and reported it all to Johnny's mother, who, being a God-fearing woman, took it to her pastor. Minister said, don't worry about that. I can cure him. Tell him to be at church next Wednesday at 4:00 p.m. after school. She says, you're not going to whip him, are you? I said, no, I'm not going to whip him, but I'm going to tell him a story that's so exaggerated that he will be embarrassed over what he's done, and he will never, ever lie again. So it was all set. Wednesday came, 4:00, no Johnny, 4:30, Johnny's not there, 5, Johnny's not there, 5:30. Preacher was about to leave when all of a sudden Johnny came staggering in. He explained that he was walking by Farmer Brown's pasture, and this flying saucer lit down. And the leader recognized him, called Johnny over, and he says, you know, we're lost. We're trying to find Dallas, Texas. Johnny said, well, give me a ride in that saucer. I'll take you over there and show it to you, but I got to be in church here in a few minutes. They said, oh, we'll get you back in time. He said, preacher, I hate to tell you this, but that thing travels fast, but it took longer than I expected. And so here I am. The preacher shook his head and said, sit down here, Johnny. And then he told his story. He said, you know, a few months ago, I was right there in that same pulpit addressing this group, and this big 10-foot alligator broke through the doors and came walking up the center aisle. And he scared all the parishioners. They jumped up on the pews. He grabbed me by the robe. He was about to take my leg off when all of a sudden this big white English bulldog came running in. He grabbed that gator by the tail and ripped him out to the yard, grabbed him by the neck, shook him a few times, killed the gator, and then dug a hole and buried him. And then that dog ran off, and he's never been seen or heard from since. Now, Johnny, do you believe that story? Johnny said, of course I do, preacher. That was my bulldog. So there is pride in ownership. Let me answer some of the questions that I asked most frequently about these dogs, and then I'll tell you some interesting incidents that we've encountered by some people that are graduates of the Terry College by no accident, and I think you'll recognize them. If I don't answer something that you want to ask me, I'll stick around afterwards, and I'll be glad to tell you anything that I know. People always want to know, how did it all get started? In 1956, I was in law school. I'd just gotten married. I had a job in the athletic department. Coach Butts gave me the job selling football tickets. I did more studying than selling because we didn't have a very good team back then. But Georgia didn't have a mascot either. Mike had died. And Cecilia's friend, Frank Hurd from Columbus, called and offered us a white English bulldog as a belated wedding gift. Well, we couldn't hardly afford to feed ourselves, but we couldn't afford to pass up on this bulldog. So we took him, and I'll have to tell you, we went over and picked him up in April, and I have never been more disappointed in my life because he didn't look anything like an English bulldog. He was tall and gangly. His chest hadn't filled out, and I'm saying, oh, what in the hell have I done now? By September, however, he had matured, chest filled out, big head, really looked the part. Cecilia went down to Penny's and bought a child's red t-shirt, size 8. Cut it down, put elastic in the neck and in the sleeves, cut out a G out of black felt, sewed it on the front, and we took him over to the Sigma Chi house before the first home football game, never intending to take him to the game. But you know how that goes after a few iced teas. Everybody said, let's take him to the game, take him to the game. So we took him to the game. Not on the field, but up in the stands. And he got a lot of attention. Georgia actually won the game. And his picture got in the Atlanta papers the next day. And Dan McGill, who at that time was our publicity director, told Coach Butts, he said, Sonny Seiler's got a bulldog, might make us a good mascot. Why don't you see if he'll let us use him? I went back in to get my box with the tickets and the cash on Tuesday. There was a note in there from Virginia Whitehead, my immediate boss, and it simply said, Coach Butts wants to see you immediately in his office. I said, oh my God, I can't afford to lose this job. I didn't know what I'd done. But I went up there. Now, he was a tyrant to a lot of people, but the guys that worked around him, particularly me, he was extremely nice. He said, Sonny, Dan tells me you got a bulldog that might make us a good mascot. I don't seem to be affording much attention around here, no entertainment. What do you say about us using him? Well, I said, well, Coach, you know, if you think that will help. He said, good, have him at all the games. Well, that ended the conversation, and that's the way Coach Butts was. And so here we are, still with the dog Ugga. Now, my classmate Billy Young from Columbus, we were having coffee in the old co-op right after we got the dog. He said, Seiler, if I had that dog, I'd name him Ugga. I said, what? What is Ugga? He said, you know, UGA, University of Georgia. I said, Billy, that's about the smartest thing I've ever heard you say. So that's how Ugga got his name. And by the way, it's Ugga, not Yuga. I have to correct the Yankee sports writers all the time. I tell them Ugga is the dog, Yuga is a horn on a Model T Ford. Yuga, Yuga! People ask, will he bite? Our answer is always the same. He never has, but if you step on his foot, he'll let you know it. They are very good around people. We raised 4 children around them, now 7 grandchildren. They don't growl, they don't bite, they don't do anything. They're just good-natured dog, contrary to their looks. They are very docile. What does he eat? Well, he'll eat anything that doesn't eat him. Their favorite by far, and this is for all of them, is turkey. Oh, Thanksgiving morning, they can't stand it when they smell that turkey cooking. We don't give them much table food. They'll desecrate a plate. They'll lick the mayo off a piece of tomato and leave it in the plate. Lick the cheese off broccoli and leave the broccoli in the plate. But that's okay because human food's not good for them. They don't have many teeth. They don't chew like other dogs. Canned food's not good for them because it sticks to their teeth and that invites decay. Dry food is best. They get a measure in the morning around 6 o'clock and they'll let you know you don't need an alarm clock around my house. And another dose late in the afternoon around 6:30, and they do right well on it. These dogs have all been on Hill's ZD, a special dry ration for allergies and weight control. It's made by Hill's, and Hill's pays a pretty good royalty to the athletic department for that. And once in a while, we'll give him a varsity dog, hold the mustard. People want to know, how does he travel? Well, he travels well, and they love to go. We've gone through 16 red station wagons, and we're now on the 2nd SUV. He rides in a large Delta kennel. He knows where it is. It's got his name on it. I don't think they can read, but I'll tell you one thing. You will not take that kennel out of their eyesight if you're away. If you take it through the lobby, and we take it upstairs sometimes, he's going to be where that kennel is or break that leash, because they know they equate with that. That means go, and that's what they want to do. We always go with the team. We fly with the team wherever they go unless it's easier for us to drive. When the Delta flight comes up to Atlanta from Savannah, where we meet the charter, they have what they call a widget. That's those things that run around, you know, from plane to plane. They'll pick Uga up, take him out to some green grass, and let him have a break, and then take him back, put him in his kennel, and we get on the charter. On the charter flights, he can go up where the people are. But we quit doing that because he's a distraction up there. We just put him in the kennel, put him underneath. He sleeps the whole way. He doesn't know where he's going, but he's just glad to be getting there. At the Georgia Center, since 1958, we've stayed in rooms 301 and 302. They're now doing those over. They've named it the Mascot Suites. I think they're planning a way to make some big bucks off of it. I said, well, suppose somebody goes in there and comes out with the fleas. What are you going to tell them? They hadn't crossed that bridge. But he stays any place he wants to stay. Ritz-Carlton, Marriott's, Hilton, New York, New Orleans Hilton, Fairmont, New Orleans, Meridian in New Orleans, Renaissance at Golf World down at St. Augustine. Hadn't done Motel 6, but to keep the light on for him. Uga, too, even slept in the cloister at the Georgia-Florida weekend. We had to sneak him in. Don't tell Billy Jones, he'd have a fit. Who makes his fitted jerseys? Gosh, we could sell these by the thousands, but we don't. For many years, Cecilia made them from children's T-shirts, but he'd get under the hedges before he had his air-conditioned doghouse, and he'd tear them, snag them. We could never find the right red color. There was nothing uniform about him. Truth of the matter is, he didn't look very good. But we met Noni Sutton, a gifted seamstress who owned the Atlanta Sewing Center in the 1970s, and she took an interest in the dog. And she began making his jerseys tailor-fitted out of a better grade of cotton and more defined G's. But this wasn't good because that cotton was very hot. In the late 70s, however, the new material came out for football jerseys, same stuff that Nike makes today. has a lot of perforations in it. It's cool and it's durable. It doesn't rumple. So every year when the team jerseys are ordered, we get some material and we get the ribbing. Noni retired, but she's trained her gifted daughter, Claudia Wathen of Atlanta, who now makes all of Uga's clothes, including his tux. And he has, as you know, a black jersey. He has a green jersey for St. Patrick's Day in Savannah. I guess before long, knowing how Mark Rick operates, we'll have to get a polka dot jersey. But he'll be ready. As the sports commentators say, the Georgia Bulldog is by far the best dressed mascot in the business, and we owe it all to those ladies. And you know, many of our fans and children have never seen Uga without his jersey. Don't know what he looks like. Reminds me of an incident a few years ago. We were in the lobby at the Georgia Center. We'd just gotten there, and a lady that I didn't know was up at the registration desk checking in, and all of a sudden, her 5-year-old daughter ran in, all excited. My daughter-in-law, Wendy, was walking Uga outside. We'd just gotten there. And the little girl says, "Mommy, Mommy, Uga's outside, and he's naked." And remember what Louis Grizzard said, if you're naked, it's a state of undress. But if you're naked, you're up to no good. Finally, they want to know, how did the dogs get to be buried in Sanford Stadium? Well, we owe that to Joe Leaves, our fine athletic director, for many years. He had Uga 1 and Uga 2 buried in Sanford Stadium down at the east end, and then when we moved, when we closed that area in, the graves were moved to the west end, and for a while they were over by where the statue of Dr. Sanford, his bust, was. And they moved that. And finally, in 1992, when we closed in the West End, they are now permanently entombed in a sealed marble vault that I'm sure you've all visited or seen at one time or another. Each dog has his own bronze engraved plaque, which memorializes that particular dog's accomplishments. And in 1992, they added a bronze life-size statue of the dog that was cast by one of the country's most famous sculptors. It was headed up by Richard Heck of Columbus, paid for by private contributions. Many people visit that memorial plot every year that don't care about football. They just want to see where the mascots are buried. They are true animal people. And it's gotten a lot of attention, favorable attention. The Pittsburgh paper did a story on that one time, and wrote the university, and this one investigative journalist said that we're the only major college in America that buries the mascots within the confines of the stadium. So much for all that. Let's talk about some interesting things that have happened along the way over 52 years. I saw a bit of it on the TV. I'm glad it wasn't turned up because it would have stolen some of my talk. But back in 1981, Vanderbilt University had installed a new carpet in their stadium called AstroTurf. It was very fashionable and it was very expensive. The first trip that they christened it with, Uga 4 happened to be on his first trip out of town. And Coach Dooley used to bus the team to the stadium as soon as we got any foreign stadium. He'd go straight to the stadium so the team could walk around and get familiar with the grounds and not be awed the next day or the next night. So we went directly to Vanderbilt, and the team was out there loosening up, and Uga was loosening up. And Coach Dooley came walking on the new turf with Roy Kramer, who would later be the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference. Roy was then the athletic director there, and they were talking about the beautiful improvement, when all of a sudden Uga did the unforgettable, flagrant breach of social etiquette right there on the emerald turf. And he was being held by D. Matthews, our friend from Albany. And Roy was speechless. So it was Coach Dooley. And the two of them stood there in awkward, embarrassed silence for a few minutes, and then Dooley, who was a veteran coach, he said what he would say probably about any freshman player who'd committed a wrong. Look at that, Roy. That dog has no discipline. Isn't that just like a damn freshman? Well, we cleaned it up, and the next night we cleaned up Vanderbilt. But Claude Felton, our sports information director, told me later that the Vanderbilt director was not at all amused about it, and that today he thinks that we intentionally gave Uga some laxative to promote his misbehavior. D. Matthews wasn't too anxious to hold Uga again for a long time. Story reminds me of an earlier incident over in Columbia at night. We'd gotten to the stadium late. We were about ready to kick the ball, and the traffic was so bad. South Carolina had painted the word Carolina across both end zones in garnet and black. Looked good. And my friend Rema Lane, big insurance man in Savannah and a graduate of our business school, was holding Uga. And he was dying to get out there because his brother went to Carolina and he wanted to be seen carrying Uga in the stadium. So they were angling across the sidelines when all of a sudden the Carolina band struck up the Star-Spangled Banner. So here's Rema, dum, 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 holding the dog. They all showing patriotic respect. All of a sudden, paper cups and ice came out of the stands. They were right in front of the Carolina student section, pelted them. You guessed it, Uga had left his calling card right there in the end zone, my friends. Well, Rema took Uga and they ran to the safety of our sidelines. We won the game, and we got the hell out of there fast after the game. Little anecdote to that, a sports writer later wrote that all Uga was trying to do is dot the I in Carolina. You know, strange things happen in Nashville with these dogs. Bob Bishop, a very prominent banker in Athens, friend of mine with whom I served on the athletic board for many years, is a graduate of our business school. You got some good people, Dean. And Bishop got appointed to the board. Well, traditionally, the athletic board members are invited to accompany the team to one out-of-town game because they like for you to get the feel of what it's like to take all of that equipment and the staff and people to an out-of-town game. It's like taking a circus. You probably never think about it because you just go there, have a good time, have a few drinks, go to the game, and have a lot of fun. But it's a lot of work. Our team actually leaves 4 days before a game, a whole staff, to take the equipment there. So they want us to know what it's about, and it's a good policy. Well, it was Bob's first year on the board, and he'd selected the Vanderbilt game. And his companion for the trip was Dr. Alan Barber, our retired vice president of finance. I'm sure some of you know Alan Barber. We arrived at the Vanderbilt Stadium, where our buses had to park at the opposite end of the stadium. Then we had to carry all we had back to our dressing room at the far end. And while in process of moving the equipment, Bob Bishop, sensing notoriety, wanted to hold Uga outside the bus, let him have a little fresh air. Well, it didn't take long for an appreciative crowd of fans and students to gather around the dog. They're like a magnet. They just collect people. I've never seen Bob Bishop dressed in anything but a coat and tie unless he's playing golf. It's like Munson would say, "Get the picture? Dapper Bob Bishop, looking like he just stepped out of a Brooks Brothers window, is proudly holding our mascot." And Bishop was. Well, apparently Uga was in a very amorous mood, because when an adoring lady stooped down to pat him, he suddenly locked his front legs around her leg and proceeded to demonstrate his affections. Needless to say, this horrified the crowd, it embarrassed the victim, it humiliated Bishop. Finally, one of the managers came to Bob's rescue and put the dog back on the bus. I can promise you Bob Bishop has never asked to hold a dog again. And no one enjoyed it more than Alan Barber behind the scenes. Not all of the dog's road trips have been funny. There was one incident several years ago in Kentucky that was almost disastrous. Elevators have always fascinated these dogs. They know that an elevator will take you someplace and they're always ready to go. At the Georgia Center, Ugga will get on the elevator. If you let him alone, when it stops on the 3rd floor, he'll walk out, turn left, walk down to his room by himself and stand there till you get there to let him in. They love elevators. Well, when Georgia played Kentucky in Lexington, football team was staying at the Marriott Griffin Gate, which is a nice facility. And on the day before the game, my daughter Swan had Ugga 6 out on his leash, having just taken him for a walk. And when she neared the elevator, she struck up a conversation with Tom Landrum, who was the chief of staff to President Michael Adams. Tom's wife, Susan, was there, and her mother, Nell Brown, were in the group. While Swan was distracted with the conversation, the elevator doors opened. Ugga got on. Leash was still firmly attached to Swan's wrist. The door began to close. The elevator was going to go up. Tom Landrum sensed the problem, put his hand in between the doors, but the doors didn't open. And here's the elevator. You know how it goes like that? Well, Swan did have presence of mind to get it off of her wrist and stuff it between the cracks. And the elevator took off, and Ugga was on a solo journey by himself. Tom had no choice but to let it go. But the thing is, we didn't know where it was going. Nobody was on there to punch the buttons, so it went all the way to the top. And all of the people in the group ran to different floors, hoping to catch the dog. Well, hell, the dog goes where he wants to go. They went to the top. He didn't punch any buttons. And when it started to come back down, it stopped at a few floors. Nobody got on. Doors open. He didn't get off until the 3rd floor. And at the 3rd floor, he decided he'd get off. He'd had enough. And he walked right into the arms of Nell Brown, who for a 70-year-old showed great response and caught him. That could have been disastrous, as you can imagine. Tom Landrum might be chief of staff to Michael Adams, but to the Seilers, he's a genuine hero. In years to come, Roy Kramer forgave Ugga for what he'd done to the beautiful emerald turf, and he came to Athens. Each April, the athletic department has what we call Rededication Day. It's a day when we have a day-long retreat at the Georgia Center, and we honor people who've done good things for us during the year. We honor the achievements that we've had. It's a nice program. Well, the speaker that year was Roy Kramer, who had just retired as the Southeastern Conference Commissioner. And he opened his remarks with a tribute to Ugga, which is interesting. And this is well set out in the book, Damn Good Dogs, and I'm going to quote from the book because I couldn't do it any better. He said, "First time I came to Athens for a football game, I was athletic director at Vanderbilt. I pulled into the Georgia Center and amazingly found a parking place right there in front of the building. I checked in, took my suitcase up to the room. 15 minutes later, a young man knocked on the door and informed me that I had to move my car because I was in the mascot spot, and Ugga was on his way to Athens. I had to park my car half a mile from the building and walk back to the Georgia Center, and that's how I learned the true significance of the Georgia Bulldog." One more story, and then I'll answer questions if you have any. I'm sure that some of you have had the pleasure and privilege of watching a football game from the Georgia Skybox in Sanford Stadium. It's quite nice. Uh, Occasionally, we take Ugg up there at the halftime. We get in a golf cart, go around back East Campus Road, come in up there. It gives us about 15 minutes up there with him. We take him to different suites, and people get an opportunity to see him close up, take pictures, and it's nice. Gives him an opportunity to cool off. Well, at halftime up there, scrumptious lunches are served and catered in each skybox. Early in the 2001 season, we were walking 6 down the hall to the Alumni Association skybox, and at the same time, a caterer was pushing a stainless steel food cart down the hall, getting ready to serve lunch in one of the skyboxes. Hall was crowded. He had to stop briefly to open the door. Well, my friends, on the lower shelf of that cart was an open pan of roast beef tenderloin with demi-glaze sauce. And as luck would have it, it was right even with Ugg's head. And when the cart stopped, he did what any red-blooded American dog would do when presented with such an opportunity. He stuck his head in and helped himself to a heaping mouthful of beef tenderloin with demi-glaze sauce. Well, that caterer had a fit. Ugg, you bad dog, bad dog, bad dog. Shoot him away. And it was hilarious. But that's not the end of the story. We walked on down the hall without hesitating. The caterer took this long fork, smoothed it over, pushed it in the skybox, and fed the hungry people. We don't tell which skybox, but it wasn't Coach Dooley's, I promise you that. In closing, let me answer one more question that's frequently asked. Why is that damn dog so ugly? People ask that. Well, this too has been answered in A.N.K. Hobbs' poem, How the Bulldog Got His Face. I'll share it with you. When the good Lord gave out faces to the dogs long, long ago, he found when he had issued them there was still one dog to go. Where's this dog's face, he called aloud. I know I must have made it. There's got to be someone hereabouts who's clumsily mislaid it. A shy young angel then stopped up. Forgive me, Lord, he said. He stuttered and he stammered and he turned a little red. I never thought it was a face. It fell out of your bag. Thought you'd discarded it. It's just a piece of rag. So I promptly went and used it for so very many things, like polishing up the halos and waxing up the wings. It's creased and crumpled, as you see. Lord, it's a disgrace. I don't know how, my dearest Lord, you can use it for a face. I realize it's all my fault. There's no one else to blame. I trust you can forgive me, Lord. My heart's so full of shame. Of course I have forgiven you, but here we've got a mess. So I'll make amends to this poor dog, and him I'll truly bless. He'll be called an English bulldog. That's about the only place where the people are so silly is to love an ugly face. But he'll be kind and gentle, and of courage he'll be full, as well as love and loyalty, that ugly, lovely bull. And that is how my children in that long-gone year of grace, the dear old English bulldog got his lovely, ugly face. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonny. Let me make a couple of announcements, and I know that some of you are going to have questions. But Sonny has some copies of Damn Good Dogs, a book that he wrote and in collaboration with Ken Hannon, who's been taking pictures up here. So yeah, so he'll be signing that. Copies will be available, I'm assuming, just outside the door. So that's one announcement. Secondly, before you ask a question, please let us bring you a microphone. Just hold up your hand. We've got a couple people with handheld mics around the room. We are recording this, And if you ask a question, not only will nobody in the room hear you without a microphone, but it also doesn't get onto the tape. So with that, any questions? Got one up here.
I brought 3 of the jerseys. It's an evolution of the jerseys. One of Ugga ones that Cecilia made, and one that Noni Sutton made later in the early 70s, and then one of the most recent jerseys out of the new material that Six wore, and I have Six's collar, the spike collar. 7 will have his own new collar, and all of these items will go into the Butts-Mehre Heritage Hall Museum. Any questions that I can answer? Yeah.
How many puppies are typically you have in a litter, and how many are all white?
Good question. We don't breed the dog, we don't sell puppies, we don't broker puppies, and we don't keep them. People think that we are a kennel. We're not. We have 1 dog. Believe me, that's all you need. But it varies. 3 is a good litter for an English Bulldog. Sometimes we've had 8 or seen 8. We don't mate them, so we don't have anything to do with the puppies. And what we do is try to systematically select them and weed them down. We have some people who keep them for us very confidentially. We don't give their names or they would be bothered to death and quit doing it. They're not interested in football. They don't use the dogs to promote sales of puppies. In fact, they don't sell puppies. So that's a good relationship. We don't tell that very much because, who cares? Well, we care, and the school doesn't want a lot of puppies running around that people dress up and take to the games, because it makes it complicated for the Sports Information Office to determine who is the true Ugga and who isn't. So we made that policy about 20 years ago, and we stick by it, and it's worked well. Yes, sir.
Sonny, I've got a picture of one of the Uggas in the Auburn game on the sidelines in the end zone. Tell us about that event with him in the end zone.
Okay. Gosh, that was a long time ago, because it was Ugga 5, not 6. And if 6 were alive today, he'd be 10 years old. But Charles had 5 where he was supposed to have him, in a designated place. They tell us where to be when we get to foreign stadiums, and we respect that. And Bill Baker, I think his name was, maybe Bob Baker, you remember? He was the receiver for Auburn, caught a touchdown pass. And if he had run his course, he would have run out of the back of the end zone. But he saw Ugga over there out of the corner of his eye, and he deviated, and he ran over there where Ugga was, where he should have been, and he gave it this number like he had 6 shooters. And when he went like that, it startled the dog. Incidentally, he spiked the ball, which should have been a penalty for celebration, but they didn't call it on the ensuing play. And when he did that, Ugga lunged for his forearm. It looks in the picture like he's going after something else. But in either event, Baker would have known it if Ugga had gotten him, and Charles pulled back on the leash just in time. That picture that's so famous was taken by a young girl who was working for the Montgomery Advertiser, and she was on salary. She didn't make a dime off of that picture, and they made thousands and thousands of dollars, the little newspaper that had hired her. And it's also captivated on the video of the game, which went on to be the game that we beat Auburn in 3 or 4 overtimes. And they've changed the rule on overtime play now, so it's a classic game that will never be repeated. I'm glad we've got it on video. That's it. Anybody else? Thank you again for having me. I feel very much at home at Terry College. One more question. Okay.
So, who produces more revenue, Ugga or your law practice?
I don't know. I expect the law practice makes more money, but they make a hell of a lot of money. The problem is none of it ever comes in my pocket. It all goes to the athletic department. And they're very selective over what they let him endorse. They don't just turn him loose to endorse anything. I mean, he's done things like Ford Motor Company, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Cotton States Insurance. They play it right, and he's a good tool for them. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks very much. Sonny, let me present this sculpture by local artist Paul Benzunas to you. Thank you so much for your remarks. It was really wonderful.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Wow, that's heavy.
Again, Sonny will be signing copies of his book afterwards, answering questions that maybe you didn't get a chance to ask during the meeting. As you're leaving, remember your ticket out of the parking deck is Terry Third Thursday. Hope I see you back here next month.